capacity with over 1,000 participants. That truly demonstrates your passion and invested interest in your children's education, and it's commendable. I will now turn the mic over to the Honourable Adriana LaGrange. Welcome, Minister.
Hello, can you hear me? We're just struggling with the, are we on?
Yeah,
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you, Minister.
Great. I'm not sure if you can see me, but there seems to be a little bit of that I will move forward. So thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you, Allison, for starting us off. Before I take questions, I just wanted to provide all of you with a summary of Alberta Education's COVID-19 response. So on March 15th, following advice from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, all in-school classes for K-12 education were cancelled due to the provincial health emergency. But that did not mean that the end of learning for the rest of this school year was before us. We looked to develop a plan. So we quickly developed a plan to ensure that students continue to learn. With feedback from the system, we quickly developed and put into action Alberta's Education Continuity Plan that outlines how teacher-directed learning for students will continue across Alberta. Our approach centers on 4 principles. The safety of students and staff come first. Student learning will continue. Resources continue to flow to schools. School authorities have flexibility to do what is best for their communities. So those were our 4 guiding principles. Since putting our plan into action, we have been fielding many questions from other jurisdictions across the country who are very interested in what we are doing in Alberta to ensure students continue to learn. I have had countless calls with my colleagues across the country and with media across Canada who have highlighted the work that has been done, which has been put into our continuity plan. For example, the CBC stated that Alberta is ahead of the game when compared to one of our neighboring provinces. I'm very proud to say that my discussions with my counterparts in other provinces reaffirms this belief. It is clear that Alberta is leading the way in many areas of managing the effects of this pandemic on our students' education. This is a direct result of collaborative efforts with all our education partners across our great province, including during this very challenging and unprecedented times. And I want to give a shout out because ASCA and ASBA and CAS and ATA and all our other education partners have been just so instrumental in helping develop that plan. For all K-12 students, school authorities are providing at-home learning opportunities, either online or through other means such as course packages and telephone check-ins. We expect that every student, regardless of their geographic location or socioeconomic status, will continue to learn while in-school classes are cancelled. This includes students in public, separate, francophone, charter, and independent schools, and Indigenous students attending provincial schools. We have set specific content delivery guidelines broken down by grades, which include content focus and hours of work expected to ensure the high quality learning that Albertans expect will continue at home. Our plan ensures that every student will receive final grades and will receive a report card appropriate to their grade level. It also ensures that grade 12 students on track to receive 100 or more credits will still be eligible to graduate and receive their high school diploma. I want to talk briefly about a difficult decision. I start that over because it was extremely, extremely difficult, and I need you to understand that we had to make during these unprecedented times. With more clarity on how the system would be delivered at home, the support programs now available to workers at the federal level, and the need to direct dollars to the frontline COVID response, we have made the difficult but necessary decision to make a temporary, and I stress temporary, adjustment to education funding. I want to be clear, this decision was not taken lightly. No decision regarding any of our valuable workers is. This is just as true in the public sector as it is in the private sector. Governments at all levels, including the cities of Edmonton and Calgary, are being forced to make difficult decisions at this time. And I know many of you are making very difficult decisions as well within your own families. The unfortunate reality is that in-person classes are not occurring due to COVID-19, and at-home learning options do not use the same staffing levels and resources. I want to stress that this is a temporary measure and that funding will return to regular levels when in-person classes resume. School authorities are encouraged to keep education assistants employed until the end of April and then make the appropriate staffing changes to meet their temporary funding adjustments. I also want to mention that we have provided funding to school divisions so that they can continue the benefits for those that are affected by this decision. Teachers and other staff, including speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, mental health workers, and physiotherapists, will continue to provide specialized supports and services to meet the unique needs of our students. Further, program unit funding continues to flow to school authorities so that they can tailor their services to continue supporting our most vulnerable children. This also means that education assistants who are funded through program unit funding or PUF funding will continue to be employed. We also recognize the importance of good nutrition for our students, even while they're not at school. Nutrition program funding continues to flow to school authorities, and they have been provided with the flexibility to either continue administering their own programs or to provide their funding to local not-for-profits to ensure that the students do not go hungry. Later today, there will be an announcement with the additional $3 million that had been added to the program funding for nutrition, and please look forward for that announcement. These are unprecedented times. However, I am confident that our education system will come out of this pandemic stronger than ever, and that all of our students will continue to receive a world-class, high-quality education. I really appreciate the adaptability of everyone in our education system who are working so hard in these unprecedented times. And with that, I'm looking forward to taking your questions. My understanding is that we have a lot of pre-submitted questions, so I'll do my best to go through as many as possible and with the time that remains, and I will switch the questions over. I do have Erin Allen here, who is my ministerial assistant, who will be reading the questions.
For those students with disabilities whereby the educational assistant was providing adapted learning support online, how do you propose that these children are now supported at home without this additional assistance?
Well, thank you for the question. And as I said earlier, we do have the teachers are integral to developing the programming and providing the programming. We've also heard from school authorities that because of the new structure, the at-home learning structure, given that individuals cannot go into students' homes because of the social distancing, etc., that we're not able to utilize all of our educational assistants. And I know this as my own daughter is an educational assistant in Red Deer. These are all challenging times, and I can appreciate the concerns that parents do have in this area, but I can assure you that the teachers are going to be delivering the programs and connecting with their students. Also, we have given school boards the authority and the flexibility to determine how they will meet these temporary adjustments, and I know that they are developing those plans right now, and it varies from school division to school division. I also want to just further clarify, because I think there has been some misunderstanding in some areas, that we have not made any adjustments to the special needs grants for the PUF students. We fully expect the school authorities to continue serving special needs students to the best of their abilities, given the limitations and of the location, and also protecting people's health. Again, this is only a temporary measure. And as soon as we can begin in-school classes, we know that we will need all hands on deck. And this includes our very, very important EAs.
Why was this decision not discussed with school boards prior to the decision being made?
Well, that's a good question in the sense that we have been working around the clock. And as I indicated earlier, on March 16th, we canceled in-class sessions. And on March 20th, we announced the continuity of learning plan. At that time, shortly thereafter, I was contacted by school boards, by parents, by the ATA, with many operational concerns that they wanted addressed. We worked diligently to address those concerns. We wanted to communicate that information as quickly as possible, and we did that as soon as possible. So that was the announcement that came on Saturday. We also felt that Albertans deserve to know as quickly as possible so that those school divisions could enact the information that they received. Ideally, I would like to have spoken with every single one of those individuals, but that's not possible. So we communicated the information on Saturday. I had a teleconference first thing in the morning with the College of Alberta School Superintendents, the Alberta School Boards Association, and the ATA. And then we further contacted the school board chairs and all of the superintendents to relay the information.
Why was a debate refused by yourself regarding the decision?
I would disagree with that statement. I've certainly been open to conversations. I have taken part in question period every single day since the session has been back in place. Last evening in the legislature, there was the Alberta's COVID-19 debate. And as cabinet ministers, including myself, all of us were there to present what has been happening over the course of time since this unprecedented pandemic came upon us. And I took questions presented by what's been happening, and then took questions from the opposition for, I believe, 15 minutes back and forth. So yes, I've been very happy to answer questions.
Thank you to Melissa Giroux for those questions.
Mm-hmm.
How can the minister justify cutting back school division funding for EAs, custodial staff, etc., after promising all of us and our school divisions in the initial announcement that funding would not be changed, a promise that school divisions relied on while creating their plan for remote education?
Again, I want to say this was not a decision that was made easily. Because of the changes, we have bus drivers that were no longer driving buses. There are many areas that where staff were not being utilized to their full capacity. When we look at the great needs, both health-wise and financially across this province, we look at an opportunity to help in that regard. We have $128 million by this short term, and again, it's a very short term measure that will be infused into the COVID fight. So again, we're all making very, very difficult decisions. As I said, my own daughter, who's an educational assistant, who's married to an electrician who's been off work for a number of months as well. These are difficult decisions to make. I know they affect families. I know I sympathize and I empathize with the angst that it caused. But again, this is short term, and we look forward to refunding or to fully funding, restoring full funding as soon as in-school classes return.
Does the minister understand that this is the second significant cut to school division funding that has occurred after the beginning of the school year, and that mid-year cuts like this are not fair to our school divisions, our school staff, and most of all to our children?
Well, again, I thank you for the question. I'm not sure what you mean by second cut. I can assure you that the budget maintains record levels of spending. Again, this is a short-term measure to adapt our funding to the actual services that we're providing at this point in time. And again, it is only a short term. All these dollars are being directed to the front lines I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to listen in last night as the Premier addressed the province and highlighted the grave situation that we are in, not only health-wise, but also financially, and that we all need to do our part in terms of helping in this response. Again, all of the we estimate approximately $128 million that will be directed to this COVID fight.
How does the minister expect children with special needs to be adequately supported if school divisions are forced to lay off educational assistants while parents are trying to cope with working from home and simultaneously supporting their children's education?
Okay, thank you for the question. These, again, as I indicated earlier, PUF funding has not changed. Special needs students are very, very important. We know that our teachers are working diligently to provide those services to those special needs students. School authorities do have flexibility, even within their funding envelopes, to ensure that those students in particular, all students, but those students in particular, are receiving the services that they require and need at this particular time. I have full confidence in our teachers that they're going to provide the instruction and the guidance that those students need.
How does the minister plan to keep school division staff who may have to go into their workplace from time to time safe in the absence of custodial and maintenance staff to clean and maintain buildings?
So again, school divisions look after their buildings, and they're tasked with those responsibilities. I would also just highlight that the funding for the custodians, et cetera, comes out of the plant's operation and maintenance funding, which has not been touched in this particular reduction.
Thank you to Jay Morris for that set of questions. What is planned to address equity for students who are already at a disadvantage, gap in skills, lack of technology, food, safety at home?
So we're trying to tackle all of those things, and given that we are facing, as you all know, very, very challenging times, I've been in constant contact with my fellow ministers, particularly the Minister of Social Services and the Minister of Children's Services. We know that we have to provide wraparound services, not just for children, but for their families. We have certainly allowed the flexibility for school divisions to continue to provide the nutrition programs through either innovative ways that they have found, or if they could provide those funds to nonprofits. As I said earlier, there's going to be an additional announcement on that $3 million increase that we were looking at partnerships with nonprofits. We will be making that later today. As far as special needs and mental health supports, again, teachers and the other staff, I should highlight that we will continue, the students will continue to have access to speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, mental health workers, family and school liaison workers, and physiotherapists. PUF EAs will continue. So those specialized supports and consultations with families should and will continue. Did I miss anything, Erin, in the question? It was a fairly long question.
You're okay.
Okay.
What about special ed students that have built a trusting relationship with their EAs and rely on them to get through their education?
Again, I fully expect those relationships with their teachers and EAs to continue. I know that, when students are off in the summertime, that those relationships often continue and are reinstated. Again, this is a short-term measure, and school divisions have the flexibility to ensure that those with the most severe needs are continuing to be met. And I'm just looking to see if I'm missing anything. Early childhood service operators in schools are looking at best ways to deliver services at home as well. I just don't want to miss anything. I'll just say this as well. It doesn't preclude educational assistants keeping in contact with their students. I know my own daughter, as I said earlier, is an educational assistant, and she has spoken to me that she is going to continue to check in with her students to ensure that they're doing well.
Thank you to Irina Rajakumar for that question. Regarding the new way of delivering education to our students, is there going to be a platform launched that will enable students to see, interact, and speak directly to their teachers and possibly fellow classmates? I can only speak from conversations with a few other families that I'm in contact with through texting that students are feeling disconnected. I wonder if providing this platform will not only provide an educational component to students, but also familiarity for our young people, K to 12, with a system that they were quickly removed from and have no further connection with.
You know, and that's a great question. I know that the delivery methods will look different across the province. That's the reality of living in such a great, vast province. But I know that we've also been working very closely with Minister Glubish, who is Service Canada or Service Alberta, who is looking at trying to increase broadband width. We've had a number of partners and you know, school divisions as well as private businesses offer to provide more technology for those who don't have the technology, or refurbish older technology so that we can get iPads and Chromebooks and other things into the hands of students who possibly don't have them currently. So we are looking at all those avenues. Again, these are decisions being made by school divisions, and if you have any ideas in those regards on how we can improve the connectivity and the interactions amongst students, please feel free to reach out to your school divisions. They are in the best position locally to support the ideas that you have and the ability to bring students and teachers and the community together.
Thank you to Rhonda Webster for that question. We are going to quickly take a question from Zoom. Do these adjustments apply to private schools or just public schools?
They apply to all schools.
Thank you for that question. How would you recommend we deal with parents who are up to this point not ensuring that the work being sent home is completed? We are a faculty understanding the importance of this work being done to be able to provide an accurate report card in June.
Well, that would be a tough one. As a parent of 7 children who at times found it very difficult to motivate and engage my own children to do what they needed to do in regards to their schoolwork. I guess what I can say is, you know, we will do our best on our side to provide that learning. We cannot force people to learn. You know, and we have to respect people's circumstances. As COVID takes place across this province, as it really starts to affect more and more people, we understand that there are going to be a number of families that are going to be affected. They're going to be ill, and perhaps that'll affect their learning. There'll be a number of teachers that it'll affect, and that'll affect the ability to provide that learning. We have to be gentle and patient and kind with each other. But we can't force people to learn. We can only provide them all of the opportunities and engage them as much as possible.
Thank you, Lynn Harris, for that question. How will the SLS grant in the new funding framework better address classroom complexity for students with special needs when school jurisdictions were already running significant inclusive education deficits? What accountability measures will be added to ensure the principles of inclusive education are upheld?
So the SLS grant is the Specialized Learning Supports Grant. It is there to fund all of our special needs students fully from K to 12 in the full K to 12 environment. This grant combines what used to be a patchwork of inclusive education grants, funding envelopes from the old system and the old funding model. In Budget 2020, this grant envelope provides $556 million for specialized learning supports. This is in addition to the PUF support funding that we have in the pre-kindergarten program. Typically what happened in the past was that children would enter into the kindergarten program with PUF, and then they would the supports would be drastically reduced in subsequent years. And what we are doing with the new specialized learning supports is providing that funding equitably across that whole learning of the students. So, and we also have looked at the reduction in red tape, so that you know, there isn't that same process of extensive, exhaustive process of going through forms, etc. We're trying to streamline the process to get as many of those dollars directly to the students where they're most needed.
What measures is Alberta Education putting in place to minimize students' regression now that many school authorities have no choice but to lay off staff who actively supported students requiring additional assistance?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. We are actually actively working, and I'm going to be even more so in the days and weeks to come, putting a plan in motion to really develop a plan that when we come back, that we're concerting all our efforts into closing the gaps that have occurred. Because we know there's going to be gaps. We know that, you know, realistically, as much as we're providing all, you know, as many supports and opportunities to learn as possible in this new environment, that there's much more that can be done once we return. So besides working with my fellow ministers and other ministries, because we also know that there will be some mental health and wellness issues to address. So I'll be working with Community and Social Services, the Minister of Mental Health and Wellness, as well as the Minister of Health, to try and determine how we can best get all of these services wrapped around our students and bring them together to provide them in a more intensive, focused way when the students come back. Additionally, we know that we're going to need all hands on deck, as I said earlier. We're going to need our EAs, we're going to need our teachers, we're going to need our additional support staff coming together, our administrators, to determine how we can close and those gaps that have occurred while students have been learning in a different way. And I look forward to working with all our education partners, including ASCA, and ATA and ASBA and CAS and so many others to develop this comprehensive plan, because it's going to need to be comprehensive to deal with what we have coming back. You know, as I said, I do trust that we have the capability once we come back to address these needs. It's just right now we have to develop the plan.
Thank you, Christy Roos, for those questions. Where is the money going for laying off the support staff, existing staff? I believe I've answered this. The temporary adjustment amount is about $128 million, and it is going directly to fund the COVID fight. I'm not sure if you've been following it, but if you've been following it, you know, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Finance have shown the extreme need that is out there for additional masks and ventilators and so many more things. So that is where this $128 million is going. Having a simplified curriculum with reduced screen time seems like the way to go. How will this be monitored, reported, assessed, and measured?
Again, this is something that school divisions and school authorities, this is their area of expertise, and I rely on them to develop what will work best for them. So they will be the ones to be able to answer that. Of course, from a divisional, from a department, we will be monitoring how that is being rolled out and developed and learning from it. And we will be sharing best practices across this province.
How will students without technology, no Wi-Fi, no devices, access their schoolwork?
Again, this is up to the school divisions to determine how to meet those needs. I know that there's more and more creative ways that they're doing it. I know many of them are actually developing learning packages that they're delivering to students. But again, this has to, because we have approximately 800,000 students when you include ECSs in the mix, that it's definitely the administrators and the teachers that are developing a plan on how they can deliver best to their communities. They know their communities best, and I trust that they will deliver it in the best means possible for them.
Thank you to Mary Bergeron, School Council, for those questions.
I also want to highlight the fact that we do have a number of resources for those who do have access to online on our website. So please feel free to go to learnalberta.ca.
The next question will be from Zoom, and the question is from Greg Gentile.
Okay.
Is there a date when you can commit to a return to funding for EAs?
Oh, good question. Absolutely. The return to funding date is when in-class education happens, when we return to school, or July, whichever comes first. So again, when we go back to school, or July, whichever comes first. So really just a couple of months from now.
Thank you, Greg, for that question. What is the projection as to when students can actually return to schools? Are we optimistic for a September start?
Well, I'd like to be optimistic that there's still some of this year that we can salvage. I'm just not sure. Again, we have to rely on the guidance and advice by the Chief Medical Officer, who I have to say has been doing an amazing job to look after the needs and protect the needs of Albertans. So ideally, I would love to say that we're going to come back this year, but that remains to be seen. And I should maybe give some information, because I think this would be valuable information for you to have. Initially, we had been told that with the peak of the pandemic would be happening around mid to late April. We now understand that that is probably closer to mid to late May. So just for your understanding of that.
How will this affect funding for next year? These kids will be returning and needing more help than ever, both special needs and typical children. What is the plan to make sure they are supported once they return?
As I say, we have record funding in education, and we are going to continue to have that. Once the new year starts, dependent on, all the variables that could take place. As I said, we don't know when the pandemic will ease off. So we have to take all of those factors into consideration. Funding will be directed to where it's most needed. We will just have to assess it as we get closer to it. I think the biggest factor is that we need to have a plan. And it's so important, and that's why we're going to be working diligently over the course of the next, as I said, few weeks, months, hopefully not months, hopefully just a couple of weeks to get that out, that we're going to have a plan on how we can target the needs once the students are back in class. It's going to be essential for us to do that.
Thank you to Crystal Metzger for that question.
Okay.
With the way the CBE is being funded, more responsibility for providing more and more basic items are being requested of the council. Knowing the current economic situation in our province, it is also getting harder and harder to fundraise, especially at the high school level. Can there be more money allocated per student or in a lump sum to each student to help with aging technology or programming, such as Kurzweil, to help ease the burdens of our schools and councils?
Okay, so that's, under our new funding model for Alberta's education system, it will free up resources that can be focused on supporting students. Like I know that because of the amount of red tape that we're getting rid of, the current funding model wasn't as flexible, but I know that the new funding model is. It does provide that sustainable, predictable funding that we were looking for, that school divisions were looking for. The other piece to that would be that it will allow school divisions to now be able to plan early on. In the old funding model, we had to wait till September 30th counts. There was so much that had to be delayed till the fall. Now, with our new funding model, this can be planned early on. School divisions, by the end of April here, will actually have a profile that tells them exactly what they'll be receiving in the fall, and so they can make those determinations very, very early on. They should be able to put things in place to support their students in a much more effective manner. Did I catch everything on that question, Erin? Okay.
We are experiencing an unprecedented time in the world. I appreciate that your department is making decisions the best they can. However, I think the delivery has been creating too much anxiety and stress than needed. Could the welfare of families, teachers, and students be considered as these decisions are announced?
Absolutely, and you know, and I appreciate you know, that question, because there is so much happening, and it's overwhelming, the amount of information that comes on a daily basis, and I can appreciate that. I know that even within my own family, I understand that. I want you to know that we're working around the clock as ministers, as MLAs, everyone, just as, you know, and a huge shout out to our health workers out there that are just going above and beyond. It is challenging times. We're trying to put the information out as in a digestible way, in a way that makes sense. We're trying to meet the needs without overwhelming. I just say, let's be kind. Let's try and work together. I know that you know, mental health concerns. You know, when you're in an isolated area, you can't get out. I know how hard. As I said, I have 7 children. To have kept 7 children at home and try to keep them engaged and also you know, in a good headspace is not always easy. So I do understand that. I really just want you to take care of yourselves first and foremost. That should be your main priority. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and then allow the learning to happen when it's able to happen. Parents, just be kind to yourselves. You're the first educators of your children. You've had your children from the day they were born. You love your children. You know when they're able and not able to, you know, to be involved, and just be kind to yourself and allow yourself the opportunity to do what you can when you can. And at the end of the day, we will work together when this is all over to ensure that if there's been any gaps, that we can address those gaps. If you do, or your child needs mental health supports, do not be afraid to ask for them. Do not be afraid to seek them out. And we can provide those numbers when we answer our questions here. I know that the Kids Help phone line is 1-800-668-6868. And I know there's other resources for parents. This is a really, really difficult time. The most important part is that you look after yourself and your children first and foremost, and teachers as well. I know I'm addressing parents, but this goes to teachers, administrators, EAs, anyone within our community. Let's look after each other, please.
Thank you, Mary and Enns, for those questions. Does temporarily firing 20,000 staff during a pandemic make sense when businesses are being directed to try and keep staff employed?
I think I've answered this, but I'll be happy to answer it again. You know, this was not an easy decision to make. This was a really, really, really hard decision to make. We had been approached by several boards that were saying they weren't able to utilize their educational assistants to full capacity. You know, the private sector and the public sector are making difficult decisions. You know, we have cities, you can see Calgary and Edmonton, they both had to make very difficult decisions as well. The unfortunate reality, the unfortunate truth of the way that we are now providing education, it is that we are not able to use the same levels of staff and the same resources. And it only makes sense that where there is a need in another area, that we are able to take this temporary measure and redirect that funding to meet that need. And as I said, it's $128 million going to fight COVID, to fight this pandemic. And we have not seen the worst of this pandemic yet. And I know the needs are going to be even greater. Already last night, I heard that the request for supports in Alberta has already utilized the $50 million that were originally allocated. There are additional dollars moving in that direction as well.
Why does the government insist on keeping with their budget when, as you stated, the situation is fluid? What is the purpose of forcing through a budget with projections that are no longer accurate?
Well, we all have to work with budgets. When budgets were made, they were taking the information that was available at that particular time. Again, it is fluid, but I think what you're seeing is that we're taking the information that we have and adapting it. We're doing the best we can with the resources we have. As I said, if you look across the country, Alberta is leading the way in terms of how we're providing the continuity of learning for students in regards to other provinces. And, and I think we can take pride in the fact that, as soon as there was a problem, we came up with solutions to it. Are they perfect solutions? No, they're not. But it is a way to continue that learning as best we can at this point in time.
Thank you, Andrew, for those questions. Would you agree we are facing a mental health crisis? If so, laying off 20,000 education workers, would you agree will have long-term impacts, not only on education workers, but on students and families?
Yes, it is a difficult time for everyone. It is a difficult time for everyone. As I said, I'm working closely with my ministerial colleagues because we know that there's going to be additional stresses in families. We know that it's going to take additional resources now and for months, possibly years to come. So we are doing everything within our power to develop, utilize the programs that we have, enhance the programs that we have and the supports that we have, and further to that, develop new programs and supports. So that is what we're working towards.
In times of crisis, we know chances for abuse and neglect increase, increasing the body's stress response system, which increases the chances for disease and illness. For some at-risk youth, it is their EA who has built that school-based secure attachment to, not the teacher. What advice would you give to a teacher in supporting at-risk youth at this time?
Again, to utilize the breadth of professional supports that are out there. And as I said earlier, we do have all of the occupational therapists, mental health workers, family school liaison workers, physiotherapists, and so many more others that are available for teachers to utilize. We also have the breadth of the whole education system that is able to help them through this time period. Again, it looks different for school divisions, dependent on where you are, but teachers are in the best position to look at what the needs are and how to best address those.
Thank you for those questions. Instead of cutbacks, funds should be redirected by elected school boards to meet those extraordinary challenges in their immunities, challenges which are based on unique local needs. So where do governments get the money from a crisis in situation, you may ask? As you may know, there are two common tools: borrowing, interest rates are at historical low, quantitative easing. Case in point, during the financial crisis, Canada and the US provided interest-free loans to car manufacturers to stop their imminent collapse. In other words, they were nationalized. Both governments applied quantitative easing to provide these loans. What is your view on that issue?
Well, that's certainly something that I think would be better answered by Treasury. Treasury is in the best position. The Minister of Finance is very well versed in all of these methods, and they would be the ones looking to that particular information, to utilize that particular piece of information.
Thank you to Stanley Haroon for that question. How will grade 12 students be evaluated, and how will this affect their entry to post-education institutions?
So grade 12 students, as I said, the teachers have a guide as to the outcomes that we're expecting in terms of the number of hours that are to be provided, and there will be no diploma exams. We were able to clarify that, in large part due to our conversations with post-secondaries who were receptive to making sure that no student would be disadvantaged by the fact that the diplomas were no longer being administered this year. Again, teachers are going to have to work through this, and I can't give a one-size-fits-all answer, but certainly the department and teachers and school authorities are going to be working together to ensure that we can answer all of those questions for teachers as they move forward.
Thank you for that question.
I think we're getting another question in off of Zoom, is that correct?
Yeah. Can you speak about changes to assessment?
Changes to assessment. In what regards? I don't have just general assessments. Oh, the PATs, okay. So PATs also have been canceled. I guess I should have clarified that earlier as well. But PATs are not going to move forward this year for any of the grade levels that are affected. Was that the whole question, Erin?
Yeah, I think that answers that.
Okay.
I'm going to summarize this question a little bit, but in some small schools, social workers come to see kids for biweekly appointments. Is there a possibility to have this option continued over a video conference to keep our kids that need it?
Again, that is something operational that school divisions will have to work through. That is something that you need to chat with your own school authority, your own school, your teacher, perhaps even the superintendent is involved in that conversation. But I don't, if the connectivity is available, I don't see why it shouldn't be able to happen. But again, I defer that to the local decision making.
Thank you to Melanie Meyer for that question.
There's numerous questions. Be patient with us.
Sorry, we're just moving on to a different set here.
Thank you. In the meantime, while Erin's finding a question, I really thank you for this opportunity to sit and chat with you. I know we spoke earlier in the year, and I've wanted to do more of these, and I really appreciate this time. Got another one, Erin?
There's a question about students who wrote their diplomas in the first semester having an advantage for post-secondary entrance. Can you speak to what the department's done related to making sure that not writing the diploma exams won't impact graduating students?
You know what, I'm not as well versed on this particular one, but I do have my deputy minister here, and I will turn it over to, sure. You know what, you can scoot in. Social distancing at its best.
Right. Thank you, Minister. I would say that we've had lots of conversations with registrars in particular at post-secondary institutions throughout the country, and particularly in Alberta. And essentially what they've said is, in keeping in line with what they're doing in their own post-secondary schools at the point right now is that they're going to accept the credits we provide and the grades that teachers assign in schools based on the criteria that have been set. So I think everybody realizes that it's a great dynamic of change for how education is being delivered across the country. And I think I would get back to the minister's original point that we have set some very good standards that are now being copied in places like Ontario in terms of base delivery of education. And I'm very confident that those will all be recognized from post-secondary students, or sorry, post-secondary institutions across the country as they evaluate the marks that the teachers assign.
Thank you, Andre. And for all of those that are on the call, that was my new Deputy Minister, Andre Corbel.
Okay, the next question is from Zoom. The new funding model provides sustainable funding for rural schools where the school population is declining. It does not provide sustainable funding for those school districts where the new numbers of children increases every year. Example, Edmonton School District. Could the government consider a flexible model that would go back to the per student funding model for growing urban schools and the WMA model for rural and declining schools?
Well, we're definitely committed to, once we roll out the new model and have a chance to have an opportunity to evaluate it, to look at things that we can do to refine it. Right now, we actually just need to get the model out there and working and get a year under our belt so that we really understand how it is working. We've certainly, since we've first rolled it out, we've been in constant contact with every school division and beyond to look at where some of those things that we hadn't unintended consequences sometimes roll up, and we knew there'd be some fine tuning. We've already done a fair bit of fine tuning. Once the model is fully in place, we will look at those additional things. But at this point in time, the idea of the model is in fact so that we have that sustainable, predictable funding, and the only way to achieve a sustainable, predictable funding was to go to that weighted moving average. So it evens out the funding for all. It's equitable funding across the whole system.
Thank you for that question. The next question comes from Lori DeWitt. Regarding the funding models to the schools, can you please explain how funding will continue to the schools to relieve pressure on the school council's need to fundraise? My grade 3 child came from homeschool this year and said the government has taken all of our money and there is no money for paper anymore. I need to bring my own paper to school. Why does the school have a spending freeze on basic things like paper and pencils? Aren't those basic school supplies that the school should be receiving funding for?
Well, and as per the Education Act, there should be no fees for school supplies, basic school supplies. Again, school divisions are making their decisions. They're the ones that set school fees for parents, but they need to do that in consultation as per the Education Act, in consultation with their families. The funding that we are giving to school divisions that through the funding model is record level funding. We are maintaining record level funding, and so again, school divisions will make the decisions that they make. But I want to also highlight that in our new funding model, there is a lot more flexibility for school divisions to administer the funds less prescriptively than they were in the past. So I think there's more opportunity for that. The other thing I would like to highlight is that something typically school councils used to fundraise for, which they will no longer have to fundraise for, particularly in the new capital that is being built, are playgrounds. And I know playgrounds are extremely, extremely expensive, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars and often very, very difficult to fundraise. And in my view, playgrounds are just as essential as any gymnasium. And so in any new builds that are being built, and I'm currently looking at the opportunity to, because there have been some schools that were missed that were recently built and modernized where they haven't had an opportunity to fundraise enough to build their playground. They've gone, one in particular has been 5 years without a playground. That's unacceptable. So we are looking at any way that we can assist those particular school councils in getting those playgrounds built, because I really believe that is a necessity.
This will be the last question we have time for today. Minister LaGrange, what is your philosophy on education delivery, and tell us what you think about the value of public education? Are you in support of privatizing education? Do you include private schools and charter schools in your definition of public education?
First and foremost, I want to be really, really clear. Public education is public education. I fully support public education. And, there is no move to privatize all of education. That's just not true. My philosophy is that we are in it together, and parents are the primary educators of their children. They know the delivery system that they want education to be delivered to their children. They know their children best. They know what will meet their needs. So I think this is referring to the Choice in Education Act, which I'll be bringing out. What I want to highlight is that Alberta has a tremendous history of choice in education. We are so fortunate to have public, Catholic, Francophone, charter, private independence, homeschooling as options for education. And it is what has created Alberta as a leader across the world in the quality and delivery of education. So what we look to do is to enhance, my goal is to enhance what is already here and what is already strong. And what is strong is a strong public education.
Thank you for that question. Minister, did you have a few words that you wanted to say?
You know what? Yes, I guess I'll just end by again thanking you. I find this mode, I would rather have all your wonderful faces in an audience so that we can engage together and have these conversations. Unfortunately, with social distancing, that's not possible. This is the next best thing. I thank you all for being on the call, and I appreciate all of that you're doing. I know as school councils, you're integral to the fiber of the education community within your area, within your town, within your city. So I thank you for all the tremendous work you're doing. Please stay connected. Please help each other out. Please be kind to each other, as I said earlier. And please stay safe. This pandemic, while it is extremely challenging, it's unprecedented, and it's creating a lot of anxiety and fear. I know that working together, we are going to come out of it so much stronger, and that we are just going to pull together as a community and as an educational community, but also as mankind. So I thank you for all that you're doing. Please be kind to yourselves, to your children, and to those around you, and just be safe. Thank you.
Thank you for finding the time in your new and complex schedules to join us today for the virtual connection with the Education Minister. ASCA is grateful to the Education Minister for her willingness to meet with, hear from, and speak to school councils and parents as we all strive to ensure that Alberta's students are supported in their opportunities to continue their learning during this time. Thank you again to the Honourable Adriana LaGrange for reaching out to connect with school councils. A reminder that this meeting has been recorded and will be posted on the ASCA website within a few days. Please be sure to visit the ASCA website noted on this slide for important news and information such as resources for parents for education continuity for student learning, nomination forms for the ASCA Board of Directors. There are 5 open director positions for 2-year terms and 1 director position for a 1-year term. Information and resources for families regarding COVID-19, this year's proposed advocacy resolutions for the AGM, newsletters, and so much more. The link for ASCA's website will be posted in the chat window, giving you a direct connection. ASCA will also be posting school council snippets, which are 2 to 3 minute PowerPoints on popular topics, to our website in the coming days, as well as posting recorded workshops. We're working hard at our office to change the way that we deliver our resources and workshops as well. They're free of charge and a great way to keep you connected with your school council work. We'll also be starting interactive virtual webinars in April as well, meeting Mondays and webinar Wednesdays, covering different topics each day. So be sure to check our website regularly for details. On behalf of ASCA's Board of Directors and the staff, thank you again. Be safe and stay healthy. Take care. To exit the meeting, please click on Leave Meeting found at the top of your screen. Thank you so much.